The light under the bridge wouldn't hold still. It swung from my hand in a hard, yellow arc, throwing the concrete ribs above me in and out of sight, then cutting across black water slick with a skin of oil and moonshine reflection. The air under there felt thick enough to chew. It clung to my face and under my collar, warm and wet, carrying the stink of stagnant bayou water, rust, old timber, and something sour beneath it, like clothes left too long in a ditch. That's when the beam caught the feet, bare, pale, standing ankle-deep in the water where the mud should have swallowed anybody up to the calf. They weren't moving. They were just there, planted under the bridge as if somebody had set them there and forgotten the rest. Above me on the deck, something dragged across the concrete, slow. Then a pause, then another scrape, uneven and heavy, like one leg working and the other being pulled. I stopped breathing. I know I did because all I could hear for a second was the blood in my ears and the distant tap of water against a piling. Then a voice came up from somewhere under the bridge, close enough to feel against the side of my neck, broken, wet, torn to pieces by pain. "You didn't even stop." I turned so fast the light hit the columns, the cables, the black water, my own boots. Nothing else. No face, no body. Just that smell, stronger now, and another drag from above directly over my head. I climbed back up so fast I barked my shin on the ladder rungs. My palms slipped on the metal. By the time I got back onto the bridge deck, panting, the road was empty from rail to rail. But my truck sat 20 yards ahead with the driver's door hanging open, and I knew I'd shut it. So who was waiting inside? It started 4 nights earlier with a job nobody else wanted. I took the bridge job because it paid too much to ask questions. That's the plain truth of it. If I'd had money in the bank, if I hadn't burned through what little I had on motels, gas, and the kind of meals that come wrapped in greasy paper under heat lamps, I might have heard the amount they were offering and known something was wrong. Instead, I heard the number and thought, fine, 1 month, maybe 2. Enough to get straight. Enough to stop looking over my shoulder every time I saw headlights behind me. The bridge sat over Bayou Sorrel in a stretch of Iberville Parish that looked the same as it had when I was a kid and somehow meaner for it. Flat black water, cypress knees pushing up from the mud like knuckles, and lean old telephone poles listing toward the ditches. Houses set way back from the road, if you could call them houses, most of them dark even before sundown. In that part of the parish, people learned young not to ask what happened 2 miles down the road. You kept your eyes ahead. You minded your own business. Folks called it respect. It wasn't. It was practice. I rolled in a little before dusk with my truck bed full of inspection gear and a coffee that had gone lukewarm an hour back. The bridge wasn't much to look at from a distance. Concrete deck, steel railings, old timber supports where the repairs hadn't fully modernized it. But it stretched longer than it should have over a body of water that narrow, crossing a slow bayou choked with reeds and half-dead trees. The kind of place that held sound too long. My first impression wasn't fear, it was annoyance. Mosquitoes found me before I cut the engine. The humidity pressed down even though it was supposed to be winter. My shirt stuck to my back the second I got out. Somewhere deep in the reeds, insects screamed in that steady Louisiana way that becomes a kind of silence if you grow up with it. Then I stepped onto the bridge. They stopped, not faded, not moved farther off. Stopped, every chirp, every rasp, all at once. I stood there with my clipboard tucked under one arm, staring into the marsh grass, waiting for them to start again. I told myself it was coincidence, some shift in air pressure, some predator moving through the reeds. That was how I thought in those days. If there was an explanation that let me keep moving, I'd take it. And a truck came up behind me slow enough that I heard the gravel spit before I turned. The man driving it was in his late 50s, maybe older, with a neck cooked red from years in the sun and a face that looked carved with a pocket knife. He wore parish-issue coveralls unzipped at the throat and had a radio clipped to his chest. When he got out, he moved like somebody careful of old damage. Not weak. Careful. "You Wade Boudreaux?" he asked. I said I was. He looked me over, taking his time, then held out a hand. Clovis Theriot, senior inspector on paper, mostly means I've outlasted better men. His grip was dry and hard. He glanced over my shoulder at the bayou, then back to me. "Marlene tell you anything useful over the phone?" Mostly where to sign and what they were paying. That got the hint of a smile. "Yeah, and that's about her speed." He popped open the back of his truck, pulled out a narrow flashlight with a red filter, and leaned against the tailgate like a man about to explain a machine. Casual. Professional. That should have warned me more than anything. If he'd tried to spook me, I'd have taken him less seriously. "Before you start nights out here," he said, "there are a few rules." I laughed because what else do you do when a grown man in parish coveralls says that with a straight face? "I'm serious," he said. The smile left with no effort at all. He lifted one finger. "Do not stop your vehicle on the bridge after sunset unless your engine dies completely." Another finger. "If you hear somebody calling for help from below, you keep driving and report it later." I remember the way that one landed. Not because I reacted. I didn't. I just watched his mouth and felt something old tighten under my ribs. Third finger. "Never walk the full length of the bridge at night. You inspect from one side only." Fourth. If you see someone standing in the water under the bridge, don't shine your light directly at them. Then the last. If your truck door opens on its own, do not get back inside until it closes again. The air hummed around us. The insects had started back up, but not as loud as before. I said, "And if I break one of those sacred commandments, what happens?" Clovis shrugged like he was talking about hard hats and steel toe boots. "Maybe nothing, until it isn't nothing. You tell all the new hires ghost stories?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes slid past me to the bridge. For a second, I had the strange impression he was listening to see if something else was listening too. Then he said, "Nobody keeps this route long. I don't care what you believe, I care what you do." That should have been enough. A sane man hears rules like that, hears the way they're said, and decides the money isn't worth it. But I wasn't sane then. Not in the clean way people mean when they use the word. I was tired. I was running. And I'd gotten very good at treating warning signs like background noise. Marlene came over the radio just as Clovis was showing me the inspection log format. Her voice had that flat parish dispatcher rhythm, part boredom, part authority. "Unit 2, you on site with the new man." Clovis clicked his radio. "We're here. Tell him not to get smart after dark," she said. Clovis looked at me. He'd already told him. There was a crackle then. Good. Last fellow thought the rules were funny too. I waited for more. None came. Clovis showed me where prior stress fractures had been patched, which support joints to photograph, how often the bayou fog rolled in thick enough to turn the railings into ghosts. We talked shop after that. Real measurements, real procedures, concrete spalling, corrosion patterns, runoff damage, the language of work. I relaxed. That's what expertise does. Put a clipboard in a man's hand and he can pretend the world is made of systems. By the time the sun went down, I had convinced myself I understood the situation. Rural parish, old bridge, superstitious locals dressing up common sense in spooky language. Rule 1 was about drunk drivers and poor visibility. Rule 2 was liability. Rule 3 was probably because the far side had unstable footing. Rule 4, maybe pranksters in the water, poachers, transients. Rule 5, faulty seals and warped hinges in the humidity. I had an answer for everything. Looking back, that was the most dangerous thing about me. Not what I'd done before I got there. The confidence I still had in my own explanations. When Clovis drove off, he rolled down his window and said, "You do your first night alone tomorrow. Keep it simple. One side only, don't go chasing sounds." I told him I'd be fine. He nodded once, not because he agreed, because he'd heard that before. After he left, I stood on the bridge a moment longer, breathing in bayou rot and warm metal. The sky over the water had gone purple, then black. Somewhere downstream, a boat motor coughed and died, and the road behind me was empty in both directions. It felt familiar out there. That was the worst of it. Not strange, familiar. The kind of empty road where a person could make one decision and live inside it for years. I drove back to the motel with the windows down and told myself I'd finally found a place quiet enough to disappear. The first night I broke a rule because it was easy. That was all it took. I started after sunset because the parish wanted minimal traffic interruption and because old rural structures read different at night. Headlights show you things daylight flattens. Hairline cracks catch glare. Rust blooms in seams you miss under the sun. That's what I told myself as I loaded the truck. The truth was, I liked working nights. Fewer people, less chance of conversation drifting toward where I was from, why I'd left, why I never stayed long in one place anymore. The bridge looked longer under my headlights than it had during daylight. The rails cast thin black bars across the deck. Beyond them, the bayou lay flat and dark as motor oil. The air carried the smell of wet wood and river mud. My tires hummed over the concrete joints as I eased onto the span. The insects stopped the second I stepped out. That silence got me more than the dark. Sound in the marsh isn't supposed to vanish. It recedes, shifts, swells. It doesn't cut off like a radio snapped dead. One moment there was a wall of chirping, buzzing, clicking life, and the next, there was only my truck engine ticking hot and the soft slap of water far below. I remember standing with one boot on the deck and one still on the running board, listening. The humid air pressed against my face. A sweat started under my arms, though the night wasn't hot enough to deserve it. Then I shook it off. I took my flashlight, my camera, and the log sheet, and went to work from the near side, just like Clovis had said. Measurements, photographs, joint condition, surface wear, rail integrity. I was good at that part. My hands knew what to do even when my head didn't want company. About 20 minutes in, I heard the splash, small. Directly below me, I froze, waited, heard nothing. Then another. Not fish. Not the random plop of something falling from the bank. It sounded like a person shifting weight in shallow water. I walked back to the truck and leaned over the rail. The beam from my light touched black water, pilings, floating trash, the slick backs of cypress roots. No person, no boat, no movement. Another splash came from farther down, under the middle of the bridge. I remembered Rule 1 and glanced at the truck. It was parked with the hazards off, engine idling. Rule 1 said not to stop after sunset unless the engine died completely. I was already violating it by the strict reading. That amused me more than it should have. If he meant don't linger, he should have said so. Then I heard what might have been a voice, not words. More like breath
The
pushed
right
through pain.
way to survive this
I told myself
posting
it was
is
a
to
bird,
stay far
nutrient.
enough back.
Wind through the support channels. Louisiana can make 100 ugly sounds in the dark, and half of them sound human if you're tired enough. Still, I got back in the truck and rolled it forward maybe 10 feet just to satisfy the little sting of conscience the rule had left in me. Then I stopped again. Nothing happened. No figure in the road. No hand on the window. No engine failure. Just the same old bridge, the same thick damp air and rust smell, the same water slapping below. I laughed at myself quietly, the way you do when you're alone and don't want to admit you were spooked. I finished the near side deck notes, then bent to check the lower flange access from the approach end instead of climbing down. I was following the spirit of Rule 3, if not the letter. That's how people like me always make room for themselves. We honor the version that still lets us do what we wanted. When I walked back toward the driver's side, the truck door was closed just as I'd left it. The interior light was off. The windshield reflected the moon in a long white scar. For one stupid second, I thought about Rule 5 and smiled. Then I saw the condensation on the outside of the glass, and there were finger marks in it. Not whole prints, just streaks like somebody had rested the side of a hand against the window and dragged it down. I leaned in close. By then, the moisture had already begun to bead over again. Could have been mine from loading gear, could have been nothing. That word again, nothing. I climbed into the cab, set my light on the passenger seat, and looked at the dashboard. Dust had settled along the top edge where the defroster didn't quite reach. In it, near the windshield, there was a line where something had disturbed the dust. Not writing, not really, just a smeared arc. But if you'd asked me then what it looked like, I'd have said it resembled the tail of a letter. I wiped it away with the back of my hand before I had time to think about why that bothered me. Marlene checked in over the radio around 9. Unit 4, status. Still alive, I said. You laugh now, she said. You all sell that line with the uniform? She didn't answer me directly. Anything from below? Couple splashes? Did you stop? I looked out over the hood at the bridge deck silvering under moonlight. For the inspection. You know what I mean, I said. No emergency. A pause crackled through the speaker, then, keep it that way. I signed off annoyed, not scared. Annoyed. I thought they were leaning into the legend because rural jobs get dull and old people like to pass around stories until they harden into policy. I finished early. That part matters. I wrapped the first inspection with a sense of competence. Notes complete. Photos filed. No issue besides some superficial surface wear and a little seepage staining on the western expansion joint. And I remember sitting in the truck with the AC fan low, feeling almost cheerful. The bridge hadn't done anything. The rules had bent and the night had carried on. That gives a man a certain dangerous kind of relief. I drove off slow, headlights cutting through a low skim of mist beginning to gather over the water. Halfway across, I thought I heard another splash under the far side, followed by what might have been a voice trying to form a word. I didn't slow down. Not because of the rule. Because I didn't want to spend another minute proving the obvious to myself. That was the first easy choice. I didn't see it for what it was then. I thought I'd done my job and kept my head. That was the last night the bridge let me believe I was in control. The second night it said my name. I almost didn't go back, not because of fear, and because I was embarrassed at how much space the place had taken up in my head. I woke late in the motel with the AC rattling in the window and the stale smell of bleach in the sheets. And the first thing I thought of was that dead silence when the insects cut out. Not the bridge itself, not the rules. Just that sudden absence, like the whole marsh had turned its face away at once. I spent the afternoon filing reports from the little parish office and listening to the old ceiling fan click overhead. Clovis came in around 4 with mud on his boots and a paper sack of boudin links sweating grease through the bottom. He tossed one onto my desk without asking and sat across from me. How'd it go? He said. Fine. He nodded, unwrapped his food, didn't eat it. Anything call to you? The way he asked it bothered me. Too specific. Some splashing, I said. Marlene acted like I was supposed to file a witness statement. Clovis watched me for a beat too long. And what did you do? I kept working. This time he did eat, chewing slow. Good. Still think it's a person messing around under there? No, you don't. I started to deny it and stopped. His face hadn't changed, but I could tell he'd seen enough of whatever expression crossed mine. He swallowed and leaned back. A lot of men hear something they can explain. Animal, trapper, drunk. Somebody stranded. That's how it starts. You give it a shape you can live with. You saying it isn't a person? I'm saying it doesn't matter what shape it starts in. That should have landed. It didn't. I was too busy resisting the pull of the conversation itself. I didn't want mystery. Mystery requires room. And I had too much in me already I was not naming. So I said, "You ever break your own rules?" His eyes dropped to his hands. Big hands, scar over one knuckle, cracked nails rimmed with dark grease that didn't come off easy. Everybody does the first time. And he looked up. "You here to learn bridge work or hear stories?" I said, "Bridge work." "Then hear me now. If somebody calls for help from under that bridge, you report it after you're clear of the span. You do not answer. You do not look for them. You do not let yourself believe it's about being a good man." Something in that line slid under my skin. Not the warning, the phrasing. Being a good man. I kept my face still and took a bite of the boudin even though my stomach had gone tight. Pepper, liver, onion, too much salt. Familiar. Childhood familiar. And the kind of food you eat with your windows down on a road through cane fields because the grease smell clings to the cab. When Clovis left, he said, "Night work again?" "Yeah." "Then don't linger. And if it uses your name, leave." I laughed once weakly. "If what uses my name?" He was already at the door. Exactly. By full dark, I was back on the bridge with a stronger flashlight and less patience. Low clouds trapped the heat. The air smelled wrong the moment I stepped out, sweeter than rot, like crushed reeds left in a bucket. My shirt stuck to me. Somewhere in the distance, a bullfrog barked once and cut off. The insects stopped as soon as my boots hit the deck. I checked my watch out of habit. 9 minutes past 9. Funny what the mind records when it wants proof later. I went through the routine. Photos first, surface notes, rail inspection from the east approach. I told myself I was unsettled only because Clovis had primed me. That's the easy explanation when another person's fear starts leaking into your own. Suggestion, expectation, old dark roads and older local folklore. Then I heard it. Wade, soft. Below me, I stayed crouched by the railing, one gloved hand on a rusted bolt head. My name had come up thin and hoarse like air forced through a damaged throat. A man's voice, not old, not young either. Wet around the edges somehow, if a sound can be wet. I looked down between the rails. Nothing but black water catching my light in broken strips. "Wade," it said again. "Please." My whole body went cold under the humidity. There are moments when fear doesn't arrive as panic. It arrives as recognition your mind refuses to process. And that voice didn't ring a bell in the clean way familiar things do. It scraped against something I had packed down so deep I'd started mistaking the pressure for personality. I stood up too fast. My flashlight slipped in my hand. The beam cut over the water, the pilings, a half-submerged branch, then back to the deck. "Who's there?" I called and hated myself the second the words left my mouth. The reply came after a pause, as if whatever was speaking had to remember how to do it. "Help me." Not loud, not dramatic, just wrecked. My first clear thought wasn't about ghosts or pranksters or danger. It was that there might actually be someone under there. Hurt, needing a line or a ladder or a call to emergency services. A person in trouble under a bridge at night in bayou water doesn't have long before exposure, shock, or bad footing does the rest. Then Clovis's rule came back to me. If you hear somebody calling for help from below, you keep driving and report it later. That was the moment the rules changed shape in my head. Up until then, I'd treated them like folklore wrapped around safety advice. Now I heard what they really were. Not precautions, permissions, instructions for surviving by refusing another person's need. I wish I could tell you I argued with myself for a long time. I didn't. I stood there with that rough voice under me and the smell of rust in my nose, and my body made the same choice it had made once before. Delay, distance, rationalization. I backed toward the truck. The voice followed, never raising itself. "Wait, don't go!" I fumbled the keys. My fingers had gone slick. The engine turned over. Headlights washed the far rail white. For half a second, I thought I saw movement under the bridge to my right, something pale in the water, but the angle was wrong and then it was gone. I drove, not fast. That's the part that still gets me. I didn't peel out like a man escaping danger. I drove exactly the speed a man uses when he's telling himself he'll handle it properly in just one more minute, once he's somewhere safer, once he's clear, once the responsibility becomes cleaner. The voice kept calling until I reached the far end. Then it stopped. At the turnout, I grabbed the radio so hard I nearly knocked it from the cradle. "Marlene." Static, then, "Go ahead. There may be someone under the bridge, injured." A pause. "Did you answer it?" "No." Another pause, longer. I could hear paper shifting, maybe, or her hand moving over the desk. "Then keep driving. I'll log it." I stared through the windshield. "That's it? That's it. There could be somebody down there." Her voice flattened further. "You did your part." I almost said more. Almost told her the voice had known my name. Almost asked how she could sound so unsurprised. But something in me recoiled from having to speak that aloud. The moment you say a thing clearly, it gets harder to cage. So I drove back to the motel and slept with the television on low and my boots still laced. Around 2 in the morning, I woke because I thought I heard something moving outside my door. Not footsteps, dragging. I stayed in bed and listened until morning light seeped gray around the curtains. When I opened the door, the walkway was empty and damp with mist. There were no marks on the concrete, no reason for the knot under my breastbone, and nothing I could point to and name. I know now that was when the bridge stopped being a place and started being a conversation. It just took me another 2 nights to hear what it was saying. By the 4th night, the bridge had started leaving things for me. I found the first wet footprint on dry concrete near the midpoint of the span. Bare, narrow. Facing the wrong direction, heel toward the rail, toes toward the center line, as if somebody had climbed straight up from the side and taken one careful step onto the deck. The concrete around it was powder dry. No drizzle, no runoff, no standing water anywhere close enough to explain it. I crouched beside it with my flashlight low and felt the air change. That's the only way I can describe it. The humidity was still there, heavy as damp cloth, but beneath it came a colder thread moving along the bridge deck, carrying the smell of bayou water gone still in the heat. Not fresh mud, old water, held water. The print had too much detail. Skin ridges near the ball of the foot, a nick across the big toe. Mud gathered in the shallow crease where toes meet the pad. Human details don't belong in places they shouldn't exist. That's what makes them wrong. I heard Clovis's truck before I saw the headlights. He pulled up behind me and got out without slamming the door. "You got one," he said. "You say that like it's weather." He came close enough to shine his own red-filtered beam over my shoulder. "Looks fresh?" "It can't be." He gave me a sideways look. "And yet?" I stood angry now because anger feels cleaner than fear. "Hey, how long were you planning to wait before telling me what this really is?" Clovis stayed quiet a moment. Behind him, the reeds moved with no wind I could feel. telling you what I think won't help. You either listen to the rules or you learn why they're there. I already followed them. He looked at me sharply. You hear it again. I shouldn't have admitted anything. Instead, I said, it used my name. He inhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. That was the first time I saw him lose even a sliver of composure. It'll do that, he said. How? He bent, touched one finger near the edge of the footprint without quite making contact, then stood again. Sometimes it knows a thing before you say it. Sometimes it knows a thing you never said at all. My throat went dry. You hear yourself every damn day. He walked me back to the truck and rapped his knuckles on the hood like he was checking a horse. Show me inside, I almost laughed. Inside what? Your cab. I unlocked it. The smell hit before the door swung wide. Mud, river rot, wet wood. Not strong, but wrong enough inside a truck that had been sealed up. Clovis leaned in, swept his light across the seats, floor mats, dashboard. There, he said. At first I didn't see it. Then the beam caught the dust on the passenger side dash. Someone had written in it with a fingertip, "Keep driving." The letters were faint, half broken where the dust thinned, but there was no mistaking them. Lowercase. Quick. Like a reminder scribbled by somebody who knew I would understand without being told twice. My scalp prickled. I cleaned that yesterday, I said. Clovis didn't answer. I looked at him. Did you do this? If I had, I'd have done it where you could watch my hand. I wanted to argue. Wanted the insult of a prank more than I wanted whatever stood in front of me instead. Somebody got into the truck. No sign of forced entry. You got a key. His face shut down at that. You think I brought you out here to fool with you. I think nobody is telling me the truth. He took one step back from the open door. In the pale wash from the interior light, his expression looked older than before, drawn down around the mouth. The truth is, this bridge doesn't care if you understand it. It only cares if you obey. There it was again. That language of compliance. Not fight, not solve. Obey. I looked past him toward the black line of the bridge, then back into the truck. And the message in the dust sat there quiet as a fact. I could hear water beneath the deck, insects in the reeds, a far dog barking from some hidden house down the parish road. Real sounds, the kind the world makes when it is still the world. Then, from somewhere under the midpoint came a wet, dragging scrape. Not loud, close enough. I slammed the truck door without meaning to. Clovis didn't jump, he just kept watching the bridge. You said this was normal, I said. He rubbed at the side of his jaw. Normal for here. That's not normal anywhere. No. He finally looked at me. It isn't. We should have left then. Instead, we finished the exterior visual from the approach side while the last of the daylight bled out. That was how deep my pride still ran. I needed the routine, the note-taking, the procedures. And if I kept writing things down in official language, maybe the night couldn't get inside me. Hairline surface wear at western joint, no major displacement, light corrosion at lower rail mounts, and one impossible footprint, and one message in dashboard dust, and one senior inspector who treated both as expected
The right
conditions.
way to survive
When
this
full dark settled,
posting
Clovis
is to
said,
stay
"That's
far
enough, back tomorrow."
back.
I said, "Why tomorrow?" "Because it's not done with you." He got in his truck and drove off before I could answer. Left me standing there with my keys in my hand and the smell of standing water filling the cab. I sat behind the wheel a long minute before starting the engine. The dash message was still there. I didn't wipe it away this time. I couldn't bear touching it. Halfway back to the motel, I had the thought I should quit. I'd just leave the keys at the parish office and keep heading west until the bridge became somebody else's problem. But trouble has a way of fitting the shape of whatever you're already running from. I knew that, had known it for months. If I left because a voice in the dark knew my name, I'd still wake up with my hands on the wheel and that night road in Baton Rouge rolling back under my eyelids. The cyclist had come from nowhere. That's the lie I told everybody. It's the lie I told so often it lost the sting of being a lie. Poor lighting, slick road, brakes pulling hard left. He'd appeared at the edge of the beam and there'd been no time. What I never told was the sound after impact. Not a scream, nothing so clean. A rough, broken dragging as he tried to pull himself toward the shoulder while I sat there gripping the wheel, listening to my engine tick and convincing myself I couldn't make it better. On the bridge, with that message in the dust and that sound under the deck, I realized something new, the texture of my silence. That was the last normal thought I had about my past. After that, it stopped feeling buried. The first real consequence came on the 5th night, and it waited until I thought I was safe. That was its talent, not just fear, timing. The day had gone ordinary enough to make me reckless. Parish paperwork, a hardware run for replacement bolts. Lunch in Plaquemine at a place with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who called everybody baby regardless of age. By evening, I had started to resent the bridge again for taking up so much room in my head. Fear doesn't stay sharp forever. It dulls. Pride comes back in the space it leaves. And Clovis was supposed to meet me that night, but Marlene came over the radio just before sunset and said he'd been delayed out on another route. "Start your prelim if you want," she said. "He'll join if he can," I asked. "You ever been out there yourself?" "Not after dark." Comforting. A little static hissed. Then she said quieter, "Some jobs don't need witnessing." That line should have sent me home. Instead, I pulled onto the bridge alone and set up under a sky the color of bruised steel. The air hung thick and warm. The smell rising off the bayou had deepened into something almost sweet with decay, like wood gone soft from years underwater. My shirt clung to me before I even lifted the first tool bag. The insects stopped. I remember muttering, yeah, under my breath as if I could normalize it by treating it like a bad habit from a coworker. I kept to the near side, took the access ladder down just far enough to check the visible supports without going all the way below. My flashlight beam moved over rivets, rock pockets, mineral staining. Procedure, evidence, material conditions, that's what I held on to. Then I saw someone in the water, not movement, presence. A figure stood under the far side of the bridge where the moonlight couldn't quite reach, ankle deep or knee deep, impossible to tell. Bare legs, arms at the sides, head bowed, still enough to seem planted. Rule 4 came back to me in Clovis's voice. If you see someone standing in the water under the bridge, don't shine your light directly at them. I should have lowered the beam. Instead, I felt that old, stubborn flare in me. Anger at being manipulated, anger at being frightened by posture and timing, anger at every warning that wanted obedience without explanation. So I centered the light on the figure's chest. It didn't react. No flinch, no raised arm against the glare, no turn away. The beam climbed by accident as my hand tightened. Damp shirt clinging to a narrow frame, skin too pale against the black water. Neck, chin, then the head tilted upward. Slowly, not like a person looking at you, like something finding the hinge and testing how far it would go. The face stayed dark. I couldn't see features, just the geometry of it shifting toward me, catching light along one cheek, one strip of wet forehead. The smell hit then, not from the bayou, hot metal, antifreeze, wet dirt. For a split second, I was not on the ladder. I was on a roadside with steam lifting from a crumpled hood and my own breath tearing in my throat. My light dropped. I nearly missed a rung. Below me, the water made no sound at all. I got back onto the deck fast enough to scrape skin off my knuckles. My chest had gone tight. Every breath felt too small. I leaned against the rail and forced myself to count 5 slow inhales, the way I'd taught myself after Baton Rouge when panic started coming in grocery store parking lots and traffic lights. Nothing chased me. Nothing grabbed the ladder. When Clovis finally arrived, I almost felt stupid all over again. He parked, got out, took one look at my face and said, "Well, you lit it up." I didn't ask how he knew. There was somebody down there. "No," he said. "Ian, there wasn't. I saw it, and now it'll come closer." The matter-of-fact way he said that took the air from me worse than if he'd shouted. We did a quick perimeter check together and found no further sign below. No splashing, no figure. Just black water nudging the pilings and that deep mud stink every bayou has. By the time we wrapped, I had nearly convinced myself the ladder angle, the dark, and my own nerves had done the rest. That's the false resolution. That's how it works. It lets you gather yourself, lets you decide you overreacted. I drove back to the motel after midnight, parked under the weak yellow light by room 7, carried my logbook in one hand and my flashlight in the other. I was halfway to the door when I realized my truck felt wrong behind me. Not a sound, a pressure. I turned. The driver's door was shut, and the windows were dark. Everything looked normal. Then I saw the mud. 5 handprints, one on the hood, one above the passenger side wheel well. 3 smeared across the inside of the windshield, as if hands had pressed there from within and slid downward. My keys hit the walkway hard enough to ring. I don't know how long I stood there before I made myself move, long enough for the motel ice machine to kick on with a rattling cough. Long enough for the smell to reach me. Mud, stagnant water, and that same faint hot metal scent threaded underneath. When I finally yanked the driver's door open, the interior light came on, soft and yellow. The prints were inside too, across the steering wheel, along the gear shift. One full muddy palm on the passenger seat where no passenger had been. I backed away so fast I almost stumbled off the curb, and the cab looked violated in a way I can't explain. Not just entered, used, the seat depressed slightly as if someone had only just leaned there and gotten out. Marlene answered on the second radio call, her voice thick with sleep and no surprise at all once I told her. "Do not clean it tonight," she said. "What?" "Do not clean it. Do not sleep in the truck. Leave it where it is till morning. There's somebody been inside my vehicle." "Yes," she said, "and you are not going after them." That calm broke something in me. "You knew this would happen." "I knew it might, and you still sent me." Her silence on the line said more than anything she could have answered. That was the betrayal of it. Not that the rules existed, that everyone around them had accepted what those rules meant. Survival first, morality later, if later ever came. And I spent that night sitting on the motel bed with every light on and a chair shoved under the door handle like a fool in a cheap crime show. At some point near dawn, I looked down and saw dried mud under my own fingernails, though I had no memory of touching the prints at all. The next morning, Clovis met me in the lot and looked at the truck without speaking. Finally, I said, "How long have you all been doing this?" He kept his eyes on the muddy palm print inside the windshield. "Long enough nobody remembers the first time." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I got." He reached into the cab, wiped one finger through the mud on the steering wheel, rubbed it between thumb and forefinger, then stared at the smear as if it confirmed something he'd hoped wasn't true. "You're marked now," he said. I laughed once, hard and ugly. You people have a word for everything except help." He shut the door very gently. "That's because help costs," he said. The 6th night, Clovis finally told me what kind of man he'd become. He didn't say it proudly. That would have been easier to hate. He said it the way a person admits to taking medicine he despises because the alternative is worse. We were sitting in his truck just off the bridge approach while rain threatened and never quite fell. The windshield filmed over with humidity every few minutes. He'd wipe a clear arc with the side of his hand, then let it cloud again. Outside, the bayou reeds bowed under a wind I couldn't feel inside the cab. The air smelled of wet vine and coffee gone old in the furnace, and the bridge itself drifting in through the cracked window. Rust and stagnant water and decaying wood. I broke the rules first year out here, he said. That was all. Just dropped between us while Marlene's radio chatter from another unit hissed and faded in the background. I turned to look at him. Which one? More than one. His face in the dashboard glow looked grayer than usual, lined deep at the corners of the mouth. He kept both hands on the wheel, though the engine wasn't running. What happened? I heard a woman crying from below, went down to the bank with a line and a floodlight and the good idea I was about to save somebody. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Thought that was what separated me from the old men who trained me. I waited. He kept staring through the windshield. Found nothing, came back up. Wife left me 2 months later. I blinked. That was the price. No, that was after. A price was I never heard her the same again. Something cold moved through me. He finally looked at me then, and I understood why I'd never been able to read him cleanly. His eyes weren't empty. They were occupied. Every time my wife asked me a question after that, some little part of me waited to hear if it was really her. Every time she cried from another room, I froze first. Had to decide whether it was safe before I went to my own damn kitchen. She saw it. Of course she saw it. That's what the bridge took. It made doubt permanent. He rubbed his thumb hard against the steering wheel seam. When she left, I couldn't tell her to stay, didn't trust the sound of her voice enough. I had no answer for that. None that wasn't swallowed by the realization creeping up on me. Converted skeptic. That's what he was. And though I didn't have those words then. A man who'd started out mocking and ended up obedient. Not because belief had comforted him, but because disbelief had failed to keep him whole. So you follow the rules now, I said. I follow them exactly. Even if someone's really there. He didn't answer right away. Then the truck door on my side creaked. Slowly. We both looked. It opened an inch, then two. No wind, no jolt. Just the seal peeling back with that soft rubber suck and the metal hinge giving a tired complaint. Rule 5. If your truck door opens on its own, do not get back inside until it closes again. We were already inside, which somehow made it worse. Clovis shut off the dashboard with one quick motion, and the cab fell into gray evening. The open crack in the door let in a ribbon of wet air smelling of mud and river rot. And don't touch it, he said. The space between us and the dark outside that crack couldn't have been more than 3 inches, but it felt deep enough to walk into. I listened for footsteps, for splashing, for the voice. Nothing. The silence stretched until my shoulder muscles started to shake. Then softly from the bridge deck ahead of us came a dragging scrape. Pause. Another. Behind that sound, lower and farther off, a man called, "Help me!" Clovis didn't move. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Yes. It came again, clearer. Hurt stitched through every syllable. "Please." I looked at Clovis, expecting some flicker, some human flinch. Instead, his face went utterly blank. Not calm. Vacant in a deliberate way, like he had turned himself off to survive the next 60 seconds. And in that expression, I saw the future the bridge wanted for me. Not death. Compliance. The door stayed open for maybe a minute, maybe 5. Time had gone wrong in that truck. At last it pulled itself shut with a soft click. Only then did Clovis breathe out. "You don't get back in till it closes," he said automatically, as if teaching a child. Then, catching the stupidity of the phrasing, gave one exhausted blink. You see what I mean? I should have quit that night. Instead, I asked the worst question I'd asked yet. Why does it know my name? Clovis's jaw tightened. What did you do before you came here? The cab felt suddenly too small. Nothing. That a lie? I looked away. Through the windshield, the bridge stretched ahead. Black rails, white center line, darkness pooled beneath. Everybody's done things. He nodded once. And that's how it gets in. I hated him for saying it because I knew he might be right. He keyed the radio. Marlene, we're postponing the run. Static. Why? Clovis kept his voice flat. Door event. A beat. Copy. I took the radio from his hand. Is this thing hunting people who did something wrong? Marlene answered after a pause long enough to become its own sort of confession. I think it finds the thing you won't turn around for. No one spoke after that. Clovis started the truck only when the last gray left the sky. He drove me back toward town with both hands tight on the wheel. Halfway there, we passed the bridge access road where my own truck sat waiting from earlier. And I saw muddy streaks already drying pale on the inside of the driver's window. I said, you ever think maybe the rules aren't saving you? Maybe they're teaching it what you'll accept? Clovis kept his eyes ahead. Maybe. I'm still alive. Does it feel like it? He didn't answer. That silence told me more than his story had. The seventh night, the bridge rebuilt my past around me piece by piece. By then, I wasn't pretending anymore. I knew the place was personal. I knew the sounds weren't random and the rules weren't folklore. I also knew leaving wouldn't undo the fact that something had already followed me to the motel, into my truck, into my sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that broken voice from below the deck and the scrape of something dragging itself closer. So I went back. That sounds foolish now, but people misunderstand fear. Once it learns your name, distance stops feeling like safety. It just becomes another place to wait. Clovis met me at the approach with a face like bad weather. We do the minimum and leave, he said. I said, you keep saying that because you keep staying longer than minimum. Marlene checked in over the radio. Her voice had lost its flatness. There was strain in it now, like she'd been listening to something just out of our hearing all evening. Wind's turning east. Get off before midnight if you can. That's new, I said. No answer. We took separate trucks onto the span, him first, me following at a slow distance with my beams catching the back of his tailgate. The bridge deck shone damp, though no rain had fallen. The air had that wrong stillness storm nights get before the first drop. Humid, pressing, metallic. Even inside the cab, I could smell stagnant water and rust. Halfway across, my engine coughed. Once, then again. I sat forward, hand tightening on the wheel. No, I said aloud, stupidly, like bargaining with machinery. Clovis's brake lights flashed ahead. He kept rolling. My truck jerked, lost power, caught for half a second, then died completely. Silence swallowed the cab except for the tick of cooling metal in my own breath. Rule 1. Do not stop your vehicle on the bridge after sunset unless your engine dies completely. Well, there it was. Ahead of me, Clovis had reached the far end. His brake lights held steady. Then his reverse lights came on and went off again, as if he'd thought about backing toward me and changed his mind. The radio hissed. Wade. Marlene. My engine died, I said, mid-span. The static thickened around her voice. Stay in the vehicle. From below the bridge came a splash, then a man's voice. He close enough to be under my seat. Wade. Every hair on my arms lifted, not because it used my name, because I knew the voice now, not from certainty, from dread. The human mind keeps records it prays never to compare. Andre. I whispered before I could stop myself. The radio went silent. Below me, the voice broke into a rough, wet exhale that might have been relief, might have been pain. You know me. I gripped the wheel so hard my fingers cramped. The night in Baton Rouge returned all at once, not as images, as fragments. Steam from my crumpled hood hissing into cold air. The smell of antifreeze and wet asphalt. A bicycle wheel spinning with one bent spoke ticking every turn. And from the dark shoulder, that dragging sound as the man I'd hit tried to move himself toward the ditch while I sat there shaking and thinking of jail, of ruined work, of how one call would turn the rest of my life solid around me. I'd gotten out then, just long enough to see him moving, just long enough to hear him try to speak through blood and broken breath. Then I'd gotten back in the car. I told myself I was going for help, told myself I couldn't do anything with my bare hands in the dark. Told myself the brakes had failed and that mattered somehow to the moral math. But I drove for 3 miles before I stopped. By then I had already started editing the story. Now on that bridge with my dead engine in the humid dark pressing on the windows, I heard the same damage and the same ruined throat. "Help me," the voice said. From behind the truck came the scrape, dragging, on the bridge deck, close. I looked in the rearview mirror, and at first all I saw was darkness and the weak reflection of my own face in the glass. Then something moved through the headlights spill. Not a full body, a shift in shadow, one side higher than the other, advancing in broken pulls. Scrape, pause, scrape. My mouth dried out so completely my tongue stuck to my teeth. The voice below the bridge started again, louder now, desperate in a way that made my skin crawl because it wasn't theatrical. It was tired. It sounded like someone who'd been in pain too long to waste energy on panic. "Wade, please, don't leave me here." Clovis came over the radio, low and harsh. "Do not get out." I snatched the mic. "You hear that voice? Doesn't matter. It matters to me. That's what it's counting on." Behind me, the dragging sound reached the rear bumper. The whole truck gave the faintest shift, in as if weight had settled against the tailgate. I stopped breathing. Something moved along the driver's side, not quite touching the body panels. I heard fabric, wet and rough, brush the metal. Then fingers tapped the bed rail, slow, thoughtful. From below, Andre's voice said, "You didn't even stop." I made a sound then, not a word, more like all the air leaving me at once. Clovis was saying something on the radio. Marlene, too. Their voices overlapped in static. Outside my side window at shoulder height came a single knock, then another, then a dragging slide down the glass. I turned my head inch by inch. There was no face at the window. Only a wet handprint spreading where a palm had touched and pulled down. The voice beneath the bridge changed tone, less pleading now, almost curious. "Ian, will you do it again?" The road ahead looked impossibly far. The far bank, Clovis's truck, the safety of motion, all of it beyond one dead engine, and a rule that no longer felt like enough. The bridge had taken my past and arranged it physically around me. Injured voice below. Easy escape ahead. Something damaged approaching from behind. A test, or a trap, or maybe the same thing. Clovis's truck suddenly rolled backward 3 feet, stopped, then surged forward again. Through the windshield, I saw him leaning hard over the wheel, not helping, not leaving either, waiting. The scrape moved away from my door toward the front bumper. I could picture it without seeing. Uneven gait, one side dragging, patient. That was the moment I understood the bridge wasn't just punishing me. It was making me choose with no excuses left. And the 8th night was really the same night because once the truck died, there was no clean line between what had been happening and what it wanted from me. People like to imagine moral choices come with clarity. One good thing, one bad thing. On that bridge, I had neither. I had rules built by survivors who'd given up trying to be decent when decency got expensive. I had a voice under me that might have been bait, punishment memory, or a real cry for help twisted through something else. And I had Clovis in the distance, blank-faced and waiting, proof of what survival could turn into if I chose caution over conscience one more time. The voice below the bridge kept speaking in that ruined, breathless rhythm. "It hurts." A scrape moved across the front of my truck. "I can't get up." Then silence, not relief, expectation. I keyed the radio. "If I go down there, what happens?" Marlene answered first. "Maybe it gets you," Clovis cut in. "If you stay put, maybe it doesn't." "Maybe," I said. Nobody had anything to add to that. I opened the truck door. Humid air rushed in, carrying the bayou stink full force. Stagnant water, rust, old timber, and beneath it that hot, sweet scent of antifreeze from a memory I had spent months trying to bleach out of myself. The insects were silent. The whole marsh was listening. "Don't," Clovis said over the radio. I got out anyway. My boots hit the concrete with a hollow sound that seemed too loud. The bridge deck felt narrower than before, rails closer together, dark pressing in from both sides. Ahead, Clovis had stepped from his truck. He wasn't coming toward me. He just stood there, one hand on the open door, expression emptied clean. And then I saw him hear it too. From below the bridge, off to our left now, a woman cried out for help. Clovis didn't even flinch. He got back in his truck, put it in drive, and rolled away. No hesitation, no guilt, just blank obedience. That was the foil reveal, if you need a clean phrase for it. The man who'd once broken the rules out of compassion had become someone who could hear another human voice in pain and let his face go still as stone. Watching him drive off hurt worse than the fear did, because for a second I understood him completely. The rules worked. They kept you alive. They carved away only what you needed to lose. I looked over the rail, black water, support beams, a narrow ladder dropping to the lower maintenance ledge, and beyond that, the muddy bank beneath the bridge. My light shook in my hand. I pointed it down and remembered Rule 4, then remembered I'd already broken it. Rules didn't matter now the way choice did. "Wade," Andre's voice again, closer. Beneath me, but also somehow inside the concrete. I swung one leg over and found the ladder rung with my boot. The metal was slick and warm. My palms slipped at once from the humidity. I descended slowly, flashlight clenched between my teeth for 3 steps. Then in my left hand when I reached the ledge, the bridge above groaned softly with cooling metal and the weight of my truck. Water tapped the pilings below in irregular beats. Every instinct in me said turn around. Not because of the thing behind me, because this felt too close to confession. On the ledge, the smell intensified, mud, rot, stale water trapped in old wood, and the sharp, mechanical tang of a roadside accident after impact, a smell with no business being under a rural bridge unless my own head was carrying it there. I called down, "Where are you?" No answer. Then, from beneath the shadow of the central support, "Here." I climbed the rest of the way to the muddy bank. The water came over my boots immediately, lukewarm and thick with silt. The beam from my flashlight jittered across reeds, concrete columns slick with algae, and slow black water moving around them. No person, no injured man, no bicycle, no anything. I took another step, and another. "Andre," I said, speaking the name fully for the first time in months. "If that's you." The sound under the bridge stopped. Even the small lap of water against the pilings seemed to draw back. I stood there listening to my own ragged breathing. Then, from above me on the bridge deck came the dragging scrape. Not below, above. Moving from my truck toward the ladder I had used, I lifted the flashlight. The beam caught the underside cross braces, slick drips on rusted bolts, strands of spiderweb trembling in the damp air. No body, scrape, closer to the ladder opening. A thought hit me so hard I nearly sat down in the mud. It had never wanted me below. Not exactly. It had wanted to see whether I would go, whether I would turn around for the person in pain instead of preserving myself, whether I was still the man who could hear damage in the dark and choose distance because distance kept the story manageable. I don't know if the thing beneath that bridge was Andre. I don't know if it was punishment or witness or some old local hunger that fed itself with whatever guilt crossed it. But the moment I stepped into that water, the voice stopped accusing me. The sound above the deck did not. I splashed back toward the ladder, light bouncing crazily off the concrete. Halfway there, I stopped. A handprint stood out on the nearest support column at chest height. Fresh mud, finger streaks pulling downward. Inside the palm, traced with a single clean line, was the curve of a bent bicycle spoke. I stared at it so long my light began to shake. Then I climbed. Every rung felt farther apart than before. My knees knocked the metal. At the top, I paused with my head just above deck level and listened. Silence. Then, from somewhere close to my left ear, a man's voice said, almost gently, "That's better." I hauled myself onto the bridge and swung the light around. Empty. My truck sat where I'd left it, dead and dark. And Clovis's taillights were long gone down the parish road. The marsh insects started up all at once so violently it made me flinch. A wall of sound. Life returning or pretending to. The driver's door of my truck was open. I don't remember opening it. Rule 5 said not to get back inside until it closed again. So I stood there on the bridge in wet boots and mud to my shins, shaking under the thick air. And I waited. After maybe 30 seconds, maybe a year, the door swung shut by itself. The engine started on the first turn. I drove off without looking in the mirror. That closed the main action, if that's what you need. I reported the truck failure. I turned in the photographs. I quit the parish 2 days later. Clovis didn't try to stop me. Marlene only said, "You answered it once." That's more than some do. I never went back to Bayou Sorrel. But survival isn't the same as being released. At first, I thought I'd been given some kind of mercy. The voice was gone. No more mud in the truck. No more messages and dust. Weeks passed, then months. I found work farther east than farther north, anywhere with steel and concrete and the comfort of measurable things. I slept better. I stopped checking my dashboard every morning. I even told myself once or twice that maybe the bridge had wanted exactly that. Not my life, my decision. Maybe it had forced me into the one choice I hadn't made when it mattered and let me walk away carrying only the memory of what almost happened. That's the false resolution, because the sound didn't come back on a bridge. And it came the first time I walked alone from a gas station to my motel after dark. Keys between my fingers, mind on nothing at all. Scrape, pause, scrape. Behind me on the pavement, I turned. Nobody. Since then, it hasn't been every night. That would almost be easier. It's only when I'm alone after dark and the road is empty and there's enough quiet for conscience to find footing. A parking lot in Shreveport, a service road outside Lafayette, a narrow sidewalk behind an apartment block in Lake Charles. I'll be halfway to a door and hear that uneven, dragging pace fall in behind me, never hurrying, never quite catching up. If I stop, it stops. If I keep going, it keeps going. I don't run anymore. That's the one specific change. I stop now, always. For sounds, for voices, for anything that might be a person in trouble on the side of the road. I've sat with strangers until ambulances came. I've ruined schedules, missed jobs, stood in rain on shoulders slick with oil and gravel because I know what kind of man I am if I don't. Maybe that means it taught me something. Maybe it means it marked me for life. I still think about Clovis sometimes, about the look on his face when he heard the cry and drove away, whether he survived the bridge or surrendered to it a long time before I got there. whether what followed him home ever stopped speaking in voices he loved. There are nights I almost call the parish office to ask after him. Then remember, I don't want to know which answer would scare me more. As for Andre, I finally said his name to someone who could put it in a report, not the police. Too late for that, and truth told too late is still a kind of cowardice. I told his sister, and I found her after months of trying and told her enough that she hung up on me, and that was her right. I sent another letter after with the whole account and no excuses. She never answered. Maybe that was the payment the bridge wanted, maybe not. I only know the thing on that span knew the exact sound of a man I left on the roadside. It knew the easiest version of me. And when I finally climbed down into the dark instead of driving away, it let me keep going, but not alone. Now when I walk at night, I leave space beside me on the path.